All right. Everyone ready to dive into some password stuff?
Always fascinating, right?
It is. And we've got a really interesting Wall Street Journal article here all about proposed new federal guidelines for passwords.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing is they want to make passwords easier, not more complex.
That is a shift.
It is. So we need to unpack this.
Yeah.
What is wrong with our current, obsession with password complexity?
Well, for years we've been told to create these really, really complicated passwords, with symbols and numbers.
Uppercase, lowercase, all that.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Right.
But the article makes a really interesting case that this complexity might actually be hurting us more than it's helping.
Okay, so how is that? How are all these rules making us more vulnerable?
Well, they highlight that these strict rules often lead to predictable patterns.
Right.
Think about it. If you need a capital letter, a number, a special character, people just end up kind of tacking those onto a simple word.
Right.
Which makes them, really easy to crack.
So it's like we're being trained to create weak passwords.
Basically, yeah, without even realizing it.
Wow. Okay, now what about the constantly forced password changes?
Don't even get me started.
Does that actually make us more secure?
No, not really. I mean, it just encourages people to create simple variations.
Like adding a 1 to the end, that kind of thing.
Exactly, like password 1, password 2. It's not real security. It's just kind of for show.
Okay, so then what's the solution? What are these new guidelines actually proposing?
Well, they're being drafted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST.
NIST.
Yeah, and they're expected to be finalized in 2025.
Okay.
And a lot of organizations take NIST's recommendations very seriously.
Yeah, they're kind of the gold standard.
Yeah.
So this could have a huge impact.
Huge impact. So instead of complexity, the new guidelines prioritize length and randomness.
Okay.
Research shows that a password of 15 characters or more is significantly harder to crack.
Regardless of all those symbols.
Exactly. It doesn't really matter if it has special characters or not.
Interesting. So longer is better, but it doesn't have to be this jumbled mess.
Right, exactly. A long phrase or a string of unrelated words is actually much harder to crack and easier to remember than, password 1 with an exclamation point.
Oh, that's interesting.
And plus, they recommend allowing a wider range of characters, even emojis.
Emojis.
But it wouldn't be mandatory. You could if you want to.
So I could have a password with a dancing penguin in it?
I mean, potentially, yeah.
That's amazing. But wait, wouldn't all these extra characters cause problems with some systems?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Like if I try to log into my bank?
Yeah, compatibility is definitely something to consider.
Right.
Older websites or applications might not be equipped to handle, spaces or emojis.
Right.
So a gradual rollout is going to be really important.
Yeah.
And thorough testing, of course.
We don't want to trade one set of problems for another. But even with longer, more random passwords, there's still the issue of remembering them.
Yeah, that's true.
I can't memorize strings of random words.
Not all of us have those brains.
Right, exactly.
But that's where this really cool thing comes in. Have you heard of passkeys?
I've heard the term, but I don't really know what it is.
Okay, so are we talking about those little keychain gadgets?
Yeah, that generate codes, yeah.
Not quite. Passkeys are a newer technology. They're designed to replace traditional passwords entirely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so instead of typing in a password, you'd use biometrics.
Okay.
Like your fingerprint, face scan, or a physical device like a security key.
So no more remembering complex passwords. Sign me up. But are they really that much more secure?
From a security standpoint, they offer some really, really compelling advantages.
Okay.
So what's really interesting here is that with passkeys, your biometric data or the information on your physical device, it's never actually stored on the organization side.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, everything happens locally on your device. So even if a company's systems are breached, your passkey information remains safe.
Wow. Okay, that is a game changer.
It is.
But the article did mention that no system is completely foolproof.
True.
I mean, even with the best technology, there are always potential vulnerabilities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hackers are constantly evolving, so
Right.
we can't just get complacent.
So even with passkeys, someone could still find a way in.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a chance they could find a way to, intercept or manipulate the communication between your device and a website during the authentication process.
Okay, well, that's a sobering thought.
It is.
So it seems like the key takeaway is that there's no magic bullet when it comes to online security.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's this constant evolution. It's back and forth,
The cat and mouse game.
Exactly.
So what does all this mean for us, in the real world?
Well, one of the key challenges that the article highlighted is the time it will take for organizations to adapt. Overhauling security systems is a big, big undertaking.
Especially for large organizations.
Huge. Especially for them. So even though these guidelines are being finalized in 2025, it could be months or even years before we see them widely adopted.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But even once companies update their systems, there's still, the human element to consider.
Oh, forget.
People are creatures of habit, Changing ingrained behaviors can be tough.
It's true. It's true.
I'm totally guilty of using the same password for multiple accounts, even though I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, me too.
It's just so much easier.
Way easier.
Right, absolutely.
So how do we get people to actually adopt better security practices?
Well, I think that's precisely why these new guidelines, with their emphasis on simplicity and user-friendliness, are so important.
Okay.
If we can make it easier for people to create and manage strong passwords, they'll be more likely to actually do it.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about making sure people actually use it effectively. Absolutely. It's about empowering people to take control of their own online security.
Exactly.
Speaking of empowering people, the article mentioned this thing called blocking.
Oh, yeah.
Common variations of compromised passwords.
Right. So what does that mean? I didn't quite get that part. Okay. So let's say there's a big data breach and hackers get a list of millions of user passwords.
Right.
A common security practice is for companies to then block those compromised passwords.
Okay.
So users can't create new accounts or reset their passwords using those specific combinations.
Oh, okay. So it's they're trying to prevent people from reusing those compromised passwords.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But wouldn't that become less effective as we move towards longer, more random passwords?
That's a really good point.
The chances of two people independently creating the same complex password are pretty slim, right?
Yeah, they are.
So blocking specific compromised passwords might not really be necessary.
And it might even create, unnecessary friction for users. Yeah, so it seems like this shift towards longer, more random passwords could have some unintended consequences for existing security practices.
Yeah, it's we're changing one thing and it's affecting all these other parts of the system.
Exactly. We need to be mindful of those ripple effects.
Yeah, so it's a complex web.
It is.
And we need to approach security holistically.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, before we move on, I have a question for you and for all of our listeners out there.
Okay.
Do you think this move away from mandated complexity, this embrace of simplicity and user-friendliness, will actually lead to better security practices overall?
That's a really fascinating question.
It is.
It speaks to this complex relationship between security and usability.
Right.
Often we try to make things more secure by adding complexity.
Right.
But that can backfire if it makes systems too difficult or frustrating for people to use.
Sure.
So finding that balance, that's the real challenge.
Absolutely. It's about finding that sweet spot where security and usability intersect. Well, we've got a lot more to unpack here.
We do.
This deep dive into the world of passwords is just getting started.
It did.
And I, for one, am really eager to see where it takes us.
Me too.
But for now, we'll take a quick pause and be back in a flash to unpack even more insights from this fascinating Wall Street Journal article.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back. And I think before the break, we were talking about how challenging it can be to get people to actually change their password habits.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the article did mention some things that the new guidelines suggest could actually make it easier on users.
Yeah, like getting rid of those forced password changes.
Oh, yeah, those are the worst.
I know, right?
I think we can all agree on that one.
Yeah, who likes those?
But the article said that might not even be that effective.
Yeah, they actually cited some research that showed forcing people to change their passwords frequently doesn't really improve security.
And in fact, it might even make it worse.
Right, because people just end up using these super predictable patterns.
When they're constantly having to come up with new passwords.
Exactly. You're more likely to just change one little thing to make a whole new one.
Makes sense.
So by getting rid of that, the guidelines are actually doing two things at once.
Yeah, making things easier for users and potentially improving security.
Win-win.
That's awesome, but then there's the whole thing with the expanded character options.
Oh, right.
Allowing spaces and brackets.
Even emojis.
Emojis.
I know.
But, is that really practical?
Yeah, the article did bring up some concerns about compatibility issues.
Right, because not all systems are made to handle those special characters.
Exactly. Some older websites, older applications, they might have some trouble.
Yeah.
And it could lead to, security vulnerabilities.
Oh, okay. So it's not just like a little inconvenience. It could be a real problem.
Potentially, yeah.
So it's not as simple as it sounds.
No, it's not just about like, oh, let's add emojis and everything will be better.
Right.
There needs to be careful planning and testing.
So that we're not creating new problems while we're trying to solve the old ones.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but how do we make sure people are actually going to use these new options effectively?
That's a good question.
I mean, will people really create stronger, more memorable passwords?
Yeah, it comes down to education and awareness.
Right.
People need to understand, like, why it's important.
Okay, so let's talk more about passkeys for a second.
Yeah, sure.
The article seemed pretty excited about those.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, but how do they actually work? Like on a technical level?
Well, one of the big things about passkeys is they use public key cryptography.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
But basically, it involves creating two keys, a public key and a private key.
Okay.
The public key can be shared,
All right.
and the private key has to be kept secret.
Okay, so how does that apply to passkeys?
So when you make a passkey for a website or app,
Yeah.
your device makes these key pairs.
Mm-hmm.
The public key goes to the website. The private one stays on your device.
So the website never actually sees the private key
Exactly.
by the public one.
And you need the private key to actually unlock your account,
Gotcha.
but it never leaves your device.
So even if a hacker got into the website, they wouldn't have your private key.
No, they wouldn't be able to get into your account.
Okay, so it's like a lock and key where the key never leaves your house?
Exactly. Great analogy.
Okay, that makes sense.
With regular passwords, your information is stored on the website's servers.
And that's what makes them vulnerable.
Right.
But with passkeys, the important information never leaves your device.
Right.
But what if you lose your device?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Like what happens then?
You would need some kind of backup, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, most passkey systems have backups,
Oh, okay, good.
either to the cloud or to a separate physical device.
Okay, so there are solutions. That's good.
You just have to be aware of it.
Yeah, but it seems like there's always some kind of trade-off between security and convenience.
True, true.
The more secure we make things, the more complicated they get.
That's usually the case.
But passkeys seem to be both secure and convenient.
Yeah, they offer a much higher level of security.
Yay.
But you don't have to remember all those crazy passwords.
Or change them all the time.
Exactly.
So it seems like they have the potential to really improve things.
Oh, yeah.
But there are still some questions, like any new technology.
Of course.
So we need to make sure they're implemented properly.
And used correctly.
But overall, it seems like a good step forward.
Definitely.
So we're talking about all these advancements in technology,
Right.
but we also need to remember that security isn't just about the tech.
It's about the people using it.
Right. It's about our behavior online.
Exactly.
We need to be smart, use strong passwords, be careful about phishing scams.
Be informed.
Right. It's a shared responsibility.
Absolutely.
And one of the big things we've learned today is that security is an ongoing process.
Always evolving.
Yeah, it's a journey, not a destination. And on that journey, it's important to have good resources.
Like the NIST guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are crucial.
They're trying to stay ahead of the game.
Anticipating future threats.
And even though they're a step in the right direction,
Right.
it's important to remember no system is perfect.
That's true.
We can't just rely on technology to protect us.
Nope.
We need to be smart about what we do online.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that these new guidelines are a pretty big deal.
They are.
It's not just about making passwords more complex.
It's about finding that balance.
Yeah, security and usability.
Yeah,
It's a fascinating time for password security.
it is.
And before we sign off, there's just one more thing.
Okay.
The article we talked about was published in the Wall Street Journal
Oh, yeah.
on December 2nd, 2024.
Right.
And I think it's important to mention that because things change so fast.
In the world of cybersecurity, yeah.
So these new guidelines give us some great insight. But we always have to stay informed about the latest developments.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Share your thoughts, your experiences with password security.
Yeah, let us know.
What strategies do you use?
What do you think about passkeys?
Keep the conversation going.
Absolutely, we love hearing from you.
All right, so until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay curious. Okay, so we've talked about a lot,
We have.
but there's this one little detail from the article that I keep thinking about.
Oh, okay. What is it?
They mentioned allowing like spaces and brackets and even emojis in passwords.
Oh, yeah.
It seems kind of radical.
It is. It is a big change.
Yeah, and it makes sense, giving people more options.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it'll create some problems too.
I mean, it could.
Like what? I kind of want to use a pizza emoji in my password now.
Well, think about, like, older systems.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be able to handle those characters.
Right, like spaces and emojis.
Yeah, and that could cause compatibility issues.
Or even security vulnerabilities.
Potentially, yeah.
So it's a good idea in theory,
Yeah,
but it needs to be implemented carefully.
exactly. We don't want to create more problems than we solve.
And will people actually use those options?
That's a good question.
Like, will they actually create stronger passwords?
Or will they just, stick to their old habits?
It's like, even with the best intentions, people don't always make the most secure choices.
Yeah, that's true.
So we have to think about the human element.
Absolutely. It's not just about the tech.
Right. We need to understand how people think about security.
Yeah, the psychology of cybersecurity.
That should be a thing.
Maybe it already is.
I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah, we've done a pretty deep dive.
And the biggest thing I've learned is that cybersecurity is constantly changing.
It never stops.
What's best practice today could be outdated tomorrow.
That's why we got to stay informed.
And adapt.
Always learning.
So to everyone listening, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being here.
Remember, security is everyone's responsibility.
It takes all of us.
We need to protect ourselves and each other.
Absolutely.
So stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.
Well said.